This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. Hi everyone! As we approach the end of the year, we are also approaching the end of Season 1 of Eat, Explore, Love the podcast. It's been a wild ride with lots of adventures to share. We are taking the first few months of the year to regroup and figure out our next steps, and the Eat, Explore, Love team would love to hear from you. We have a couple of ideas brewing, but we want to hear from our listeners to see if there's anything that would be helpful for you. We're looking for any type of feedback, ranging from, should I look into getting a co-host? Would you like to be more of an active part of the podcast where I interview you guys about your favorite cities? Would you want to hear from more medical experts, travel experts, self-love experts? If you have any thoughts, we want to hear them at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. We at Eat, Explore, Love appreciate all of your support and kindness in listening over the past year. That's 130 episodes that you've sat through and listened to. I've been so lucky to not only be able to go on all the adventures I've been able to experience, but I've been so lucky to have all of you to share this with. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter and send us an email at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Eat, Explore, Love the podcast. Today I am chatting with Jayne Reynolds, a mental health nutritionist. I loved getting to chat with Jayne as she focuses on using food and nutrition for you to actually feel better rather than focusing on what you look like. She even uses data and your blood work and blood tests to see what your body actually needs rather than focusing on achieving whatever is out there in the stratosphere of what you're supposed to be looking like, which, as you all know, I appreciate very much. She has a lot of experiences with dietary restrictions such as celiac disease and many other food intolerances and allergies. I learned so much from Jayne, and I hope you do as well in listening to this conversation. Hello, Jayne. It's so lovely to have you. Thank you for coming on Eat, Explore, Love the podcast. So nice to meet you.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
I know that you have, your job title and your personal labels that maybe one puts on oneself. Would you, and we're going to get into all of those things in this conversation, but would love to just introduce you to this audience of, in your own words, who are you?
Yeah, I'm board certified in holistic nutrition, and I work with a special emphasis on helping people with their mental health. And so I use nutrition and its components to help people get past the things that they're struggling with, whether that's struggling with waking up in the morning, it takes 10 pots of coffee to get going and 3 glasses of wine to fall asleep at night, all the way up to somebody who's struggling with a bipolar diagnosis or severe depression and anxiety, and everything in between. And then I work a lot with people on different chronic health conditions that they're dealing with as well.
So you've mentioned something that's incredibly niche in dealing with the relationship between food and mental health and, all the other things that typically you would hear a nutritionist dealing with. What got you into that specific topic of specializing in mental health with food? Because it's so interesting.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we start these journeys out because we struggled with our own health, and it set us down a path where we were trying to figure out what was going on. So it led us, away from perhaps the conventional way of doing things and looking for other answers because we weren't finding them there. And that was my story too. Had a E. coli infection after my first daughter was born, just about a week later. And about 2 weeks after all of the treatment for that, I was in hospital, IV antibiotics for 3 days. And the anxiety attacks started about 2 weeks after that event. And I thought I just had postpartum depression because a lot of moms deal with, anxiety and depression and that kind of thing after their babies are born because of the hormonal shifts and changes. But they didn't go away. They just got worse and worse and worse. And they lasted for 7 years before I got them under control. And I did the things that were recommended, like going and getting antidepressants. I went on benzodiazepines trying to control the anxiety. I was seeing a therapist, and those things were helpful, but they by no means, they did not fix any of the problems. And when I reached breaking point. I lost my job because I was having anxiety all day long, and I wasn't momming well, right? I just couldn't cope with everything. I kept calling my husband home from work. And I reached out to a friend, and she said, you haven't tried naturopathic medicine. You haven't tried that holistic approach. Why don't you give that a shot? And so she recommended her ND. I went to see them, and they did something. They did urine testing for neurotransmitter function inside the brain. So it just kind of gives us the levels that are functioning inside the body. And when they did that, it wasn't my serotonin pathway, which is our calm, happy, and typically associated with anxiety pathway that was deficient. It was my dopamine pathway, the pleasure reward pathway. So we started using amino acids to fix that problem, and that helped. And then another chiropractor recommended that I go gluten-free. And when I went gluten-free, my anxiety attacks stopped in 1 week. And I hadn't done it to stop the anxiety. I'd done it because my gut was still messed up. But it fixed the problem. And I thought, well, if I learned this much just from this one thing that I changed, what else am I missing? And it caused me to go back and get food sensitivity testing done. And then people started asking questions. And I was on a leadership track at the time, and they were like, kind of, what do you want to grow up to be? And as I worked through that process, I was like, this is what I've been through, and I want to learn how to help people to do that. So I did my board certification in holistic nutrition, which looks at everything from sort of a traditional Chinese medicine, naturopathic standpoint, and then went on to study through the Academy of Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition, and also Amen Clinics, got their brain health certification under my belt as well.
Wow, that's a lot to take in and digest. And I think that says a lot about you and your character, that you took a negative experience by most people, where most people would have just given up and said, this is just my life now. You decided to do something about it for yourself and make a better life for you. And obviously then as a result to your family, but then you also decided to take it a step further and help other people. So I thank you for that on behalf of the world, because there's not enough people like you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I find that interesting. With your food sensitivity testing, did you come up, just out of curiosity, did you come up with gluten as a food sensitivity for you, or it just so happened to help your mental health, and you don't have to eat that way if you don't want to, but it's helped in other ways?
Right. When I did my food sensitivity testing, it definitely came up.
Okay, good.
And my grandfather was celiac, his brother was celiac, and my mom has gluten sensitivity or intolerance as well. She has not tested positive for celiac. We went through the steps. I did testing for the genetic components, and they were not there, and they basically told me you will never develop celiac. But I think there's a lot of pieces that we miss in that, like the non-celiac gluten sensitivity, right? That is a very, very real thing for very many people in this nation, just because of the hybridization of the wheat and all the processing that's gone into that. So that's a very real problem for a lot of people. And it definitely came up on that IgG panel at the time. Now, I've done a lot of gut work and it's off, but I still have symptoms if I get into it. And I think that a lot of that is there is actually like a celiac of the brain that we don't know about. Like we don't test for that. We test for celiac of the gut. We don't look for that component in mental health ever. And so, I wonder sometimes if that's just some of the missing pieces that we don't know about. So as a general rule, 99.9% of the time I stay away from it as much as possible just because it doesn't serve me.
And how does that impact your work? Does that give you, because I feel like a lot of people are going on, and obviously this is not the case for you, but a lot of people come to me as someone with celiac, as someone that has become sort of a voice for anybody in my circle. I'm always asked, oh, I heard that gluten is good for X, going gluten free is good for my skin or whatever have you. And when it was part of a really big trend is when people started coming to me, and it made me a little uncomfortable, that because I know that there are repercussions for folks that go gluten free that don't need to go gluten free, and they have to be super careful. So how do you approach that when you have patients coming to you and determining what kind of diet you suggest to them?
Yeah, we do a delayed food sensitivity panel for every one of our clients who comes into our office. Because I'm dealing with mental health, there are so many components that are related to gluten, and there are so many components that are related to dairy that are well studied. Schizophrenia symptoms, bipolar, manic can be related to gluten intolerance without somebody even knowing. So I always test those things. I'm looking for those things for my clients. If I just had a panel that I just went over with somebody and gluten was not on there. So in that situation, if they feel like they're having symptoms from it, because there are other components to gluten that can trigger problems, right? It is a high FODMAP food, which means that it's rich in these naturally occurring sugars. We know the FODMAPs because of beans. So we eat beans. We joke about them being the magical fruit that makes us toot, right? That's because they have these natural sugars in them that can ferment inside the digestive tract. And wheat does too. So for some people who are sensitive to those high FODMAP foods, it's worth removing it from the diet and giving their body a break and working on those different components. So there's different aspects to why. If somebody doesn't have it on an IgG panel or an IgA panel, then we are looking at saying you can keep it in, but let's look for like a sourdough or a sprouted grain or whole grain, getting back organic, just getting it back to the source, or even some of our ancient grains that were a lot cleaner and less messed with, that some people tolerate a whole lot better.
And you talked a little bit about the impact of your mental health. Another question I get asked a lot, and I think you can answer this from multiple perspectives, is how long before you start feeling the effects of eating gluten free? So for me, it was for my siblings, it took them about 2 years because I'm one of four. 3 out of the 4 of us have celiac. My brother and my sister, to me from the outside, it was like, oh, within a year or two, they were recovered completely. Granted, they were a lot younger, not as much damage had been done. Maybe that's a factor. I was diagnosed a little, obviously, I'm older than them, so it took a little longer. It took about 10 years, I think, for me to feel the difference and for me to feel better. So, what was your experience once you started going and having these dietary restrictions and feeling yourself coming out the other end? And what are you finding with your patients as well?
Yeah, when we're dealing with IgG sensitivity, which is different from celiac, right? Celiac, it's doing physical damage to the microvilli inside the small intestine. So we know that that can take a long time to recover from. And I think it depends on the components that they're using to get themselves right side up on that path, because there are some things that you can do. We know that exercise helps. We know that L-glutamine powder in certain circumstances can help to rebuild and regenerate the mucosal lining of the intestine. So for some people, that recovery happens a whole lot faster than for others. And there are certainly times when I've met individuals who had celiac disease who have stopped eating gluten but have done nothing to work on. They're not on a probiotic. They've never done L-glutamine. They've never done anything to really work on repairing it. And they're still living on a relatively junky diet, right? They've done the swap of junk glutenated foods all the way over to junk gluten-free foods.
Yes.
And that's just highly inflammatory for the body, generally speaking. And so they don't feel better because they haven't gotten some of those pieces done. For myself, as I was working towards, eating very clean, I told you within 1 week, my anxiety attacks had gone. Within a month, I was feeling a whole lot better. And I think that is the case that those IgG antibodies can last for up to 2 months. So the half-life is about a month. So that's usually when we start seeing the turnaround.
Okay.
But I'll have clients back in my office within 2 weeks saying, I don't understand what you did, but my mood's better, my aches and pains are gone, my joint pain, my brain fog is lifting, like I'm just generally feeling a whole lot better. So that can happen relatively quickly in my experience with the people that I've worked with.
I love to hear that. And I think that's, as you're talking, I'm kind of putting the pieces together of context of my life. Oh, okay. When I made that change, yeah, maybe that's why my attitude changed as well. If just to put myself in the vulnerable hot seat so that way other people can feel comfortable coming to you as well. I am someone that I have celiac, I have gastroparesis. I do struggle with depression and anxiety. Nothing formally diagnosed, but just I know my body and my mental well-being. I know that that's how I feel. What's your first steps in that you take with a patient that's presenting those types of symptoms to you?
Yeah, we go through a fairly intensive first month of intake. I have 3 different questionnaires that I have people fill out. One is a nutritional assessment questionnaire. It looks at all the different body systems. And we just do an assessment. Like, is it blood sugar dysregulation? Is it thyroid function? Is it something to do with your heart and how it's functioning? We're looking at all those different pieces to make sure that we're targeting the right areas before we even begin. Thyroid dysfunction, gut dysfunction, even just a traumatic brain injury can affect the way the microbiome functions. So we're looking, large intestine, small intestine. Where are we seeing the symptoms there? And then I do something called an amino acid therapy chart, and it looks at symptoms associated with serotonin deficiency, dopamine deficiency, blood sugar dysregulation, and GABA.
Okay.
And endorphins. So we're looking at those just to try and see which pathway people are falling into as far as the symptoms are concerned. And then we look at another one, question-wise, it's called pyroluria. And it's when your body's making iron. Sometimes that process doesn't work very well, and your body basically ends up robbing you of zinc and vitamin B6 and omega-6s in the process and depleting you. And we need all of those enzymes to help us. So we need those nutrients to make our enzymes, to make our neurotransmitters. So you can end up deficient in that, and it can cause this kind of chronic, like if you were the kid that was always anxious from childhood on, you may just be deficient in those nutrients because you've got some high cryptopyrroles. So those are my assessments. And then testing wise, I do a delayed food sensitivity test with everyone. I do something called an organic acid test, and that allows me to look and see what's going on in the gut microbiome. It gives me like a big 30,000 foot view of some of the pieces that, the good guys versus the bad guys. It helps me to look at mitochondrial function, so how you're making energy inside of your body, and nutritional deficiencies is part of that as well. And it gives me a little bit of a glimpse at the neurotransmitter piece. And then depending on the person's circumstances, so if I had somebody with severe gut distress, we might be doing a comprehensive stool analysis. Or if somebody's really off and we are not getting clear answers with the symptomology answers for the aminos, I might be doing a neurotransmitter test, urine test. We can do that. So it just kind of depends. And then I do a very comprehensive intake with blood labs, so CBC, CMP, lipid panel. And we gather all of that information, nutritional deficiencies. We gather all of that information, go over all the results together, and then make a plan that is customized to that person depending on what their needs are. If it's showing that we're off with thyroid, I have practitioners I can recommend that they go out and talk to get those things under control, because if your thyroid's off, if it's hypo, you can be very depressed and walking around with a little blue cloud or black cloud over your head, and you have no idea what's triggering it, but it's just subclinical hypothyroidism. If you're anxious, you could have hypothyroidism. It's just overactive and it can trigger anxiety. So we're looking at all these different pieces and making sure that we're then helping to funnel our people in the right direction. The number one starting point for anxiety and depression for my people is balancing blood sugar. Always balancing blood sugar. Anxiety has exactly the same symptoms as low blood sugar. And we are so dysregulated in this country. We have no idea what normal blood sugar should be. And so a lot of people struggling with that, and just getting them eating every 3 hours and having protein at each one of those meals is very, very helpful for building their neurotransmitters. They need the protein to do that. But then keeping their blood sugar stable so they're not experiencing anxiety.
So thank you for all of that.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot.
if for someone that is dealing, are there anyone listening to this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, okay, I'm struggling with depression, anxiety, I feel like that's the basics of what a lot of people, especially in the United States, are dealing with. Are there any quick, easy things that they could start off with if they don't have access to be able to talk to you or someone that
Mm-hmm.
specializes in nutrition the way that you do? What are some quick things that they can apply to their daily lives, or is it unfortunately
Yeah.
that simple?
It can start out that simply, but I would encourage that if you feel like you're stuck and you made some changes, to reach out and get help, because obviously it can be a really big, it could be something you really need to dig into to try and figure out what's going on. But when I've got somebody in my office or on the phone and we're just talking about quick starting. So I had a gentleman that I was starting work with, struggling with severe crippling anxiety episodes, weakness all over. He's had points where he's like dropped to the floor, can't get up, doesn't feel well. And just reviewing his diet, like have a look at what you're eating, keep track. There are so many apps out there that you can use to just track your intake of food for a few days in a row. So you can make sure that you're getting enough protein. I try to recommend 20 to 30 grams at every major meal and 10 grams at every snack. So you can do that with some nuts or grab a handful of cooked chicken or something, so that you're keeping your stuff stable, your blood sugar stable throughout the day. That's the first place. I'd get on a good multi that is not got, watch your supplements. You need to make sure you're free from allergens. Make sure it hasn't got any hidden wheat in there, especially if your clients are dealing with a lot of celiac. But it will help supply some of the vitamins that you just might be missing that are needed for helping to make your neurotransmitters. And then you can easily do an elimination diet where you take out gluten for at least 2 weeks, preferably a month, and then reintroduce it and see if your symptoms come back. And that's where I started. I didn't have money for all the testing. I started with that elimination diet. So that's one of the ways you can do it. You can also keep a food journal and just say, this is how I ate today. And then tomorrow, how did I feel? Was my mood elevated? Was it suppressed? Was I worried all day long? Are you overdoing the caffeine? Are you, drinking energy drinks and then wondering why you're anxious all day long? There are a lot of huge clues that you can do very simply by yourself.
Being that, my fear, and I was always resistant. Well, first of all, I had a very hard time with nutritionists that actually understood A, celiac, and B, understood then when gastroparesis was introduced, they
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know what to do with me. So, um, but so you have actually given me, I feel like, oh, I wish I found you when I was in
Oh,
my late teens and 20s, because I feel like you're understanding and speaking a language I'm understanding. Uh, my question to you is, whenever they had me do food journals, I always stopped myself from doing it, because another part of my personality that really drives my family nuts is I'm a little bit obsessive. And once I started food journaling, I
mm-hmm.
felt myself getting into a really bad spiral about it. And I don't know what it was, I stopped myself before it could even get too far into it. So can you talk me off the ledge as far as food journaling and helping me get a healthier relationship to
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful, generally speaking, about not triggering eating disorders, or obsession around these things. Um, when I started out, it's funny just how much you progress, right, as you go through life and learn different things. And so when I started out, the things that I learned were fairly black and white, like don't ever eat inorganic food and don't ever eat gluten and don't ever and if you do, it's going to cause all these problems and you're going to make yourself ill. And I found myself just kind of in a space where it was freaking me out or upsetting me, or I felt very rigid about the things that I could do. And the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition, Christina Veselak, she's an amazing teacher. And she's so gentle and she has such a wonderful approach about it. And so there are some things that I've learned from her that have kind of taken me, to step back from that. If food journaling is not a healthy habit for you, don't do food journaling. That's not the way to go about it. Let's get you a food sensitivity test and let's get all the answers in 2 weeks, and you don't have to put yourself through that mental process. If getting on the scales is difficult for you because it creates an unhealthy body image or whatever it is, then just go by how your clothes fit. Do your clothes feel comfortable? And if they are tight, then do you just need to go up a dress size and not stress about it right now? Let's not create, bad habits around food or unhealthy thoughts around food. She's wonderful. She'll say things like, she had a client once who literally was just living on potato chips. And so she said, well, let's do this. Let's start, instead of taking that away and making that the enemy, she's like, let's just start doing protein every 3 hours. And let's make sure you have one healthy vegetable with every meal that you eat. And 3 days later, she checked in with the client. The client said, I haven't felt like I needed a potato chip because I'm actually feeding my body, and so she didn't have to make it a rule about don't eat potato chips. It was just let's kind of crowd it out. Let's not give it any room for the craving, right? So I've become over the years just a lot more gentle, maybe a lot more mercy, a lot more grace and understanding when I have conversations with my clients, because I don't want to make their mental health worse.
Mm.
Yeah.
Especially when the whole purpose of what you do is looking at mental health and food. I want to talk about mental or the body image stuff for a
Hmm.
second. Uh, I have a lot of women in my family that I talk to them all the time. And I feel that they always look at me and go, because I was 95 pounds soaking wet all up until college. And then I gained a bunch of weight. But even then, because I started off so small, gaining that bunch of weight just made me healthy as opposed
Hmm.
to I've never had the dealing with being overweight, and a lot of women in my life have. And there's a whole bunch of podcasts that my listeners have listened to where I've expressed, it's not great being on the other side of the spectrum either, where you're too skinny. And
Right.
I always was frustrated and would tell my family members when they say, "Oh, I want to look like you." I'd say, but this is me being sick. Like, I'm sick.
Hmm.
I'm not feeling well. You don't want to look like this. Why would you want
Hmm.
that? And I'm still to present day having those conversations with close relatives of mine. How, when people are coming to you with the goal of losing weight, how
Hmm.
does mental health factor into all of this? And how do you guide them to where you're taking a more healthy approach at looking at their bodies and at food in general? And then hopefully it comes to helping out their mental well being.
Yeah, I'm pretty upfront and pretty blatant. I am not your weight loss captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't love weight loss because it is so complicated. And I don't know why the guys have such an easy time with it. They're like, I looked at a bunch of celery and I ate a blueberry and I lost 15 pounds and I feel fantastic, right? And all the women are like, I've been starving myself and I'm still 200 pounds overweight and I don't know. So I don't love weight loss because it is so hard, and the hormones play such a massive role in that. Your gut health and your microbiome plays such an enormous role in that. So what I tell my people is, if you come and work with me, you may lose weight, you may not lose weight. I don't care about your weight. I care that you have the sexiest labs on the planet. I want to help you to get to the place where you feel physically well, you have energy, you are accomplishing the things you want to in life. If the weight comes off with that, then fantastic. But that isn't, you need to know coming in to work with me that that's not what we're working on. And I've been on the other side of it too with you. I don't know for sure that it was H. pylori, but when I did, I just did supplements and herbs for that and it resolved the problem. But I got down to 98 pounds soaking wet. And I had I was working at a retirement community, and I had a gentleman, his name was Alex, he's long gone now, but he would come up to me and say, I just, you're just getting so skinny. I just don't like how skinny you're getting. I just don't, I just don't think it's, great. And I finally stopped him one day and I said, Alex, would you stop and tell a woman on the street that you thought that she was too fat? And he goes, no, that would be so rude. And I said, well, it's kind of the same thing that you're doing right now to me. And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that. And he just stopped. So sometimes I think we just need to have clarifying conversations that are centered around that. And then once you've been that thin because you weren't well, it is hard. I was 98 pounds then, I'm 130 now. It's hard to be at that place where you have this healthy weight that you're carrying around and going back up 3 dress sizes or whatever, just to kind of wrap your head around those pieces. So I try. I mean, I'm not going to lie; it's a battle sometimes for me. But if I'm helping my clients, I'm really just wanting them to be comfortable in their own skin, comfortable with their body image. Some of the exercises that you go through where you sit down naked in front of a mirror and say, thank you to the different various bits of your body that are the way they are and the shape they are. I had twins. I am 5'2". My belly was enormous. It has not gone back to where it was. It is never going to go back to where it was. But when I look at the scarring and I just look at it and I go, thank you, body, that you were strong enough to carry twins almost a full term. You delivered them safely. These are the scars of life that just give me, I have 2 beautiful 25-year-old twin daughters, 26-year-old, that will get shot. I was wrong. So they're 26. They just had their birthday, in my defense. But I have these beautiful daughters to show for it and great relationships with them. What scars are your bodies carrying around that it doesn't go back to the way it was? There's so much that goes into who we are and what our shape is and all of those pieces. So we need to have a lot of grace with ourselves in a world that's telling us to be something else. Just be yourself.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the having children, because that's the first thing I say when people, I have not had children and I do not plan on having children, but I also look at my body and be like, you've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good on you for like coming back and being, I'm not super strong, but I'm working on it. But thank you
Yeah.
for coming back stronger than ever. And I look
Mm-hmm.
at the women in my life that have had children. I go, I don't understand what you're ashamed of, because look at
Mm-hmm.
what came of that. Like there,
Yes.
so I find that interesting that that was something that you said as well, because I
Mm-hmm.
100% agree with you. And do you find that people are receptive to your bluntness about weight loss journey? Do you find that it's even they're happier than they ever were, regardless of the weight loss or not weight loss? How are you finding that result?
I have had a couple of people that are still just frustrated because they haven't been able to lose the weight. And again, I still think, because I work with a lot of postmenopausal women, so those shifts are really, I'm glad that there's light being brought to the menopausal journey and all of the wonderful things that that does to us. I think we do a fairly decent job of educating our kids through menopause, through puberty, but who was there to like tell us this was what we were going to deal with and how our bodies would change when we went through the change.
Yeah.
um right. So there's been a couple that are still frustrated by that, but for the most part they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and I'd rather call it like it is and just say, because I don't want you to come and spend your money with me if you are trying to get a result that I cannot possibly promise to provide for you. There are weight loss specialists, and if that's what you're looking for, then go do that. That isn't something I can help you with, and I don't want you to waste your money here if that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So could we delve, if someone has, to piggyback off of something that we went earlier, and I'm making a hard pivot back to where
Yeah,
we
that's
were.
okay.
What I have, not just a gluten allergy, like I said, and I also don't just have gastroparesis, but I have other food tolerances as well. I have a lactose intolerance, which I do not follow at all because my diet is so limited. I need to indulge and I'll deal with the consequences. But I also have a sorbitol intolerance
Hmm.
and maybe fructose as well. There's one other that I always forget and I just avoid a lot of things in case, because I know I've forgotten them. So how do you help people manage if they have multiple things? Because a lot of people with celiac, it's not just celiac, it's also other
Mhm.
things as well. So how does one deal with that, and also with the mental health component, not make themselves feel like they're deprived of so much when they have to limit
Right.
their diet in such a way?
Yeah. So when I've got somebody coming in, I mean, those are all different, like a complex um, amalgamation of all kinds of things going on there. But when I hear those things going on, I start working on gut repair with my clients. The goal is to get you back to where you have a lot of variety. And when somebody shows up in my office and we've got to take out some of these foods in the beginning of the journey, right? The plan is not to leave them out forever. The plan is to take them out for as long as we need to while we're working on gut repair, and then reintroduce whatever we can as we go down the path. So whenever somebody comes into my office with all those things going on, I'm thinking in my head that we need to do some things to get the gut lining restored. We need to make sure that we're supporting every part of digestion starts in the mouth, and then with the stomach. So we're producing digestive enzymes every time we chew. They're starting to break our foods down, and then they're getting into the stomach. We have to have enough hydrochloric acid in our stomach to break down foods. People with blood type A tend to have very low stomach acid naturally, so they struggle digesting meat and some of those things. And then when we get into damage in the small intestine, whether that's small intestinal microbial overgrowth, right, SIBO, or uh, um, just celiac disease that's done a lot of damage, then we need to do some things to help restore the integrity of the gut lining. I have found with my clients that there's IgG powders. So Mega Mucosa is one of them. I think it's Microbiome Labs. They have a powder that it just sort of feeds the intestinal lining and helps to restore it. Some of them work well with L-glutamine. It just depends on, there are some cancers and things you have to be careful with doing L-glutamine. But there are things you can do to help. Slippery elm, makes the gut more comfortable. Aloe is very healing. So we're going to take some of those nutrients and herbs and we're going to put them into that situation. And then we might need to do, like in your case, with when I hear all those ols coming up, or lactase, lack of lactase for breaking down cheeses and like causing lactose intolerance. That tells me that we need to do some things to get the microbiome in a better place in the small intestine, so that you're not struggling with fermentation of those things sitting there and then triggering bloat, gas, diarrhea, or constipation, or alternating constipation diarrhea. So once we have those things under control, then it's a lot easier to start bringing some of those foods back in and decreasing some of the intolerances when we do those programs. And I'd handle it that way for somebody who came in with celiac, or somebody who came in with, the gal that I was just speaking to, she had 23 different food intolerances. And at that point, I'm looking at it and going, the integrity of your intestines is just compromised, right? You've got protein particles seeping out into the bloodstream and triggering these responses. You don't have enough digestive enzymes to help break these down. So we can supplement with digestive enzymes. We can supplement with HCl if we need to get the stomach acid back up within reason. There are things I have to watch for and things that we can do, right? But just generally speaking, anything we can do to help support that. Digestion's an exhausting process for the body to go through. You're mostly a walking, talking, digesting organism. So, your whole intestines are working on doing those things. So anything we can do to help support it and alleviate some of that burden, that's kind of where we're starting, so that you shouldn't have to keep those things out for the rest of your life.
Yeah. As you were talking, it occurred to me that I am sure people have to get quite vulnerable with you, especially if your focus is mental health and how to get your gut in a
Mm-hmm.
better place to make you feel better emotionally in all the ways.
Mm-hmm.
How do you draw the line, because you are a mental health nutritionist, not a mental health therapist?
Mm-hmm.
How do you draw that line with your clients of making sure that you're able to keep the focus? Because I remember going to a random doctor, nothing to do with my gut, and he just happened to ask the right questions, and I just broke down and
Right.
unleashed all my emotional baggage. And just in this experience with you, I can imagine that you're getting a lot of emotions
Mm-hmm.
to you. How do you draw that line, and how do you guide them through to someone that can actually help them in a more permanent, in a different way, as far as being an actual
Right.
talking therapist?
Yeah, I am part of what should be your mental health team. I am not the be all end all. So I still have a talk therapist. I see him every other week. I just got promoted to once a month. I was rather excited. I've been through a very, very difficult season over the last 18 months, and I needed that outlet, somebody to go and talk to. I just started collaborating with an art therapist in town she's a therapist as well, but she does art therapy. So whenever somebody comes to work with me, I have a list of resources that I provide. If things start getting a little bit more deep than it puts me outside of my scope, then we start talking about who's a therapist in town that you can go and see. I actually work out of a therapy office in Mesa, Arizona. So I have therapists right here in my office that I can refer to. But sometimes I've spoken to other therapists who are like, they specialize in family trauma or childhood trauma or relationship, whatever, and so then I can, or they work really well with teens, and then I can refer out to those different collaborative partners that I have. And we offer, I'm always working on complementary therapies with people. So, sometimes acupuncture is the best thing you can go and do to help with that, to bring back emotional balance. So, I try and make as many recommendations as I can that seem appropriate without being overwhelming about steps they can take besides working with me, because I'm just a piece of a big puzzle and helping anyone.
Do you, excuse me, do you collaborate with the other folks on someone's mental health team, or do you just stick to your lane and focus on what's happening with the patient right in front of you? I don't know if they're going to their therapist and the therapist is like, hey, this is something that's going on with them, the results that I'm getting, and collaborating back and forth that way. I don't know if you have any insights with that.
I'm certainly open to it, and I have collaborated with physicians, but it tends to be more like they're naturopath, like, because we want to make sure that we're not overlapping supplements or medications or some of those other things. So I tend to do that more than anything. My clients self-report. They'll come back and say, well, we worked on this and these are the steps that I'm taking. And then when I'm working with my folks, we do a lot with amino acid therapy, which we haven't touched on yet in this call. But if somebody's dealing with a serotonin deficiency and they are, or they have a lot of serotonin symptoms, and they are anxious and they're not sleeping at night, and they might have OCD, right? And they're just sort of stuck in these patterns, a lot of anger, a lot of pain, TMJ, fibromyalgia. Those are all symptoms of serotonin deficiency. Then depending on the client, depending on the medication that they're taking, that has to be a really, explicit, you have to be careful. This is why you come and see me. We can do some things. We can do tryptophan. We can do 5-HTP, which will help provide your body with the building blocks it needs to make the serotonin. So I'm helping them to feel better through the process so they can work through the issues with their therapist. I'm giving them a platform where they feel better so that they can work through them. And for a lot of my clients, just getting blood sugar under control deals with a ton of the serotonin symptoms. Those two pieces are massively connected. And so if we can get their blood sugar regulated and get them on protein every 3 hours, they can suddenly find that they are actually working through their issues in therapy a whole lot better than they were before, because their body is now in a place where it's not completely stressed out. It has the building blocks it needs, and it's actually in a stronger foundational place to move ahead with some of those other modalities.
What have you felt has been the most rewarding moment in all of this for you in this chapter in your career, and what you've been able to do and accomplish for folks?
I think it's, I joke about being an unapologetic, quintessentially British, addicted to chocolate, and an unapologetic harbinger of hope. There was so many times that I felt when I was going through this process, I thought my brain was broken. I had no clue that it was actually my physical body that was triggering the symptoms that were going on in my brain. And when I thought about, if I just had a broken leg, then they'd know what to do. They'd set it, they'd put it in a cast, and everybody would know there was something wrong with me because I'd be walking around on crutches. And instead, I'm kind of walking around with this invisible illness, and people don't understand why I can't even sit through a church service because the music's too loud and it's overstimulating and it's triggering my anxiety, and I have to leave the space. And, it didn't make sense to people. And I just felt so very alone. And I was very concerned that, if I went and spoke to somebody, they were going to lock me up and throw away the key while they got me, back on track. And so I think the most rewarding part of all of this is when you figure out all of these pieces, and it might be my body that's off, that this might actually be really easy to fix or resolve 80% of the way in the next 3 months. That makes it reduces the stigma and the shame that's associated with it, and just brings an incredible amount of hope. And then when I get to work with clients, like the gentleman I told you about at the beginning, was having struggles with his episodes, I've got him doing protein every 3 hours, and he's sending me a text that says, I actually think I feel a bit better. Oh God, that's fantastic. That tells me we're on the right track. I had a gentleman, he's given me permission to share his story, Lex. When he came into my office, he was on 17 different bipolar medications and still angry and frustrated and upset and arguing with his wife and volatile. And we got his blood sugar under control. We took out his food sensitivities. He kept working on the things that we'd done. He got back to endurance cycling. It's his favorite thing to do. And he is now down with his psychiatrist's help to 5 different medications, but not 17. So he still needed some of the medication, and it's still managing some of the symptoms, but because he's got his eating under control, he's just doing so much better. He sends me texts like about once a month, or every 2 months. He'll, hey, I just wanted to check in, let you know I'm doing really amazing. It's those stories that just get me up and fire me, and fuel me every single day to feel like I'm making a difference in the world, even if it's just one person at a time.
Yeah, that's incredible. It makes me emotional for a story that I will share with you once this podcast is over. But I'm sure everybody has, when hearing that gentleman's story and hearing your process through all this, there's someone that they're thinking of in their lives that,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had a hard time with nutritionists for a variety of reasons, and that you just cured, I think, a lot of how I felt about it. So thank you. I just
You're very welcome.
I want to just be aware of your time, but I know
Mm-hmm.
that you mentioned that you're in Arizona. If other folks are hearing this and inspired and want to be able to work with you, how can they? You always ask this usually at the end, but I'm going to ask this now. How can
Mm-hmm.
people find you? How can people work with you if they don't live in Arizona? Is that possible?
Yeah, there's many states, like about 2/3 of the states, I don't have any trouble working in via telehealth. Some of the others, they get title specific, so you have to be a registered dietitian to treat anything personally. For those folks, I have a 12-week program that I can take people through. It teaches you everything that I've learned in the last 7 years, and we just go stage by stage, like how. We do all the introduction, like the assessments. So they're doing those for themselves. They're learning as they go. They have a little educational video every day, and then they have worksheets that they can do. There's recipes, there's handouts, and then we work through each stage: protein, carbohydrates, fiber, fats, mindset, complementary therapies. We just go through all those things in the 12 weeks, and we do it in a group coaching setting. And as long as I'm doing that as sort of a 30,000 foot level, I can still work with those clients as well. And the best way to get hold of me for any of those pieces, I made myself a bit.ly link because it's so much shorter and so much easier to do. So it's bit.ly and then / all lowercase meet Jayne. And my name is spelled with a Y. So MEETJAYNE.
Perfect. And we'll have the link to that in the description notes for the
Wonderful.
podcast, so everybody can find you. And once I get my funds together, I will
That sounds good.
Because I have all the gut health stuff, and now I need the mental health stuff to get figured out too. So thank you so much. Before I let you go, I want to be able. Am I allowed to ask you? I always ask 3 rapid fire questions at the end of every episode. Would it be okay to ask you those questions?
Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Perfect. In your opinion, what is the city with the best food?
Oh my goodness, that's a really hard question. The city with the best food. Gosh, I've eaten good food in a lot of good places. So sometimes I think it's the bigger cities because they have more allergy tolerance, right? Yeah. So, and I think sometimes the further east you go, the harder that gets. And so, I had a friend who lived in Nashville, and not Nashville. she was in Tennessee, but she was like, nobody knows celiac, nobody knows my food intolerances. So we have got some great restaurants here in Phoenix, like Intentional Foods, that work and Picasso's Italian Kitchen. It's all gluten-free. So there's some really good eateries here, but I have had some fantastic. Sisters Oregon has a wonderful little gluten-free bakery that I really enjoyed. So there's lots of little spots, I think, all over.
I have not thought of Oregon as a potential hotspot. So
Oregon is a hot spot for healthy food and allergen-friendly stuff. They're really quite progressive in those fields.
I love that. I'm going to have to add it to my travel bucket list.
There you go.
Do you prefer a city that requires you to be active or relax?
I like, so my favorite spaces are spaces where like it's 112 degrees right here in Phoenix in September. So I like cities where I can get outside and still breathe because it's not too hot. So anywhere where I can be that has like a river or a park or a forest trail land that I can go and walk through, those are the places so that I feel relaxed in that activity. I am not a city girl. My husband and I have these, I grew up in a city, but I much prefer the country. And my husband and I have these conversations over and over again. I would prefer every day, all day. We just got back from Lake Michigan, talk about perfect. It was just absolutely glorious while we were there. So yeah, that's my ideal.
Amazing. And what is the city where you learned the most about yourself?
Definitely here in Mesa. I think if I had stayed in the UK, I don't know that I would have ever pursued this. I think I would have gotten very stuck in the system of I'm sick, and so I don't know what to do with myself, and then the conventional medicine pathway, because I don't think I ever would have. I don't know that that's true, but I feel like I would never have been introduced to home, naturopathic medicine and some of those other pieces, and then having the ability to learn all of those skill sets for myself in an educational facility and be able to use that and build a business around it. That is definitely something that's really been a stateside thing. I happen to live in Mesa, but, and have done for the 29 years I've been here. But I think being here has given me those opportunities, and that really has been something that I'm incredibly grateful for.
I love that. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me, first of all, and thank you for all the beautiful insights that you shared. I feel like I could talk to you for years long.
Oh,
so hopefully
that makes me so happy.
Hopefully we'll be able to have you back on the podcast at some point to talk about, because I didn't even get to a lot of the questions that we were thinking of discussing today. But thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you do. And we will make sure that everybody has access to being able to hopefully get access to your services in the description notes of the podcast. So thank you so much.
That's wonderful.
It was lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. I really hope that you enjoyed that. And if you are struggling and need a different solution for your mental health, or just want another person on your support system team, as Jayne puts it, the link to her services are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to our next week's episodes. Till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on eatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.